Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, freaks and geeks, children of all ages. Welcome back to the Creepypasta Power Hour. In today's episode, we're going to be covering the story Mr. Widemouth. I don't have too much to add to this, so let's get into it. During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river, never remaining in one location for long. We settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, and there we remained until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there are fragments in the attic of my brain which belong to the various homes we lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless. Chasing after another boy in the backyard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft to float on the creek behind the apartment we rented in Pennsylvania, so on and so forth. But there is one set of memories which remains clear as glass, as though it was made yesterday. I often wonder whether they are simply lucid dreams produced by long sickness I experienced that spring, but in my heart, I know they're real. We were living in a house just outside the bustling metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine, population 643. It was a large structure, especially for a family of 3. There were a number of rooms that I didn't see in the 5 months we resided there. In some ways, it was a waste of space. But it was the only house on the market at the time, at least within an hour's commute to my father's place of work. The day after my 5th birthday, attended by my parents alone, I came down with a fever. The doctor said I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for at least another 3 weeks. It was horrible timing to be bedridden. We were in the process of packing our things to move to Pennsylvania, and most of our stuff was already sealed away in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day. They served the function of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always loomed around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head and compound my misery. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with mono. My first memory of the small creature was asking if he had a name. He told me it was Mr. Widemouth, because his mouth was large. In fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body. His eyes, his head, his crooked ears, but his mouth was by far the largest. "You kind of look like a Furby," I said as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look. "Furby? What's a Furby?" he asked. I shrugged. "You know, the toy, the little robot with the big ears you can stroke and feed them, almost like a real pet." "Oh." Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity. "You don't need one of those. They aren't the same as having real friends." I remember Mr. Widemouth disappearing every time my mother stepped in to check on me. "I lay under your bed," he later explained. "I don't want your parents to see me because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore." We didn't do much during those first few days, but Mr. Widemouth just looked through the books, fascinated by the stories and pictures they contained. The 3rd or 4th morning after I met him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face. "I have a new game we can play," he said. "We have to wait until your mother comes to check on you because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game." After my mother delivered more books and soda at the usual time, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under the bed and tugged my hand. "We have to go to a room at the end of this hallway." I objected at first, as my parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without their permission, but Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguishing feature was a window opposite the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across it and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open. He then beckoned me to look at the ground below. We were on the 2nd story of the house, but it was on a hill. From this angle, the drop was farther than 2 stories due to the incline. "I like to pretend up here," Mr. Widemouth explained. "I pretend there's a big, soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you'll bounce back up like a feather. Give it a try." I was a 5-year-old with a fever, so only a hint of skepticism darted through my thoughts as I looked down and considered the possibility. "It's a long drop," I said. "But that's a part of the fun. It wouldn't be exciting if it was a short drop. If it were that way, you may as well just bounce on a real trampoline." I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce back up to the window, or something unseen by human eyes, but the realist in me prevailed. "Maybe some other time," I said. I don't know if my imagination is strong enough. I could get hurt. Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl, but only for a moment. Anger gave way to disappointment. If you say so. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived holding a small box. I want to teach you how to juggle. Here are some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons. I looked in the box. It was full of knives. My parents would kill me, I shouted, horrified that Mr. Widemouth had brought knives into my room, objects that my parent would never allow me to touch. I'll be spanked and grounded for a year. Mr. Widemouth frowned. It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try it. I pushed the box away. I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to be thrown around in the air. Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives, slid under my bed, remaining there for the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was underneath me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth often woke me up at night, saying that he had put a real trampoline under the window, a big one that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but Mr. Widemouth persisted. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early in the morning, encouraging me to jump. He wasn't that fun to play with anymore. My mother came to me one morning and told me I had her permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would be good for me, especially after being confined to my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put on my sneakers and trotted out the back porch, yearning for the feeling of the sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting for me. I have something I want you to see, he said. I must have given him a weird look because he then said, It's safe, I promise. I followed him from the beginning of a deer trail, which I ran through the woods behind the house. This is an important path, he explained. I've had a lot of friends about your age. When they're ready, I took them down this path to a special place. You're not ready yet, but one day I hope to take you there. I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place lay beyond that trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, the last load of our things had been packed into the moving truck. I would soon be in the cab of that truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I was leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that his intentions were not to my benefit. Despite what he said otherwise, for this reason I decided to keep my departure a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime tomorrow with the help of an endless supply of coffee, 6-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man about to run a marathon, not one about to spend 2 days sitting still. Early enough for you? My father asked me with a hint of sympathy. I nodded and placed my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. This is the last move, son. I promise. I know it's hard for you, as sick as you've been. Once Daddy gets promoted, we can settle down and then you'll make friends. I opened my eyes as we backed down the driveway. Mr. Widemouth's silhouette was in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn onto the main road, at which point he gave a pitiful little wave goodbye, steak knife in hand. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to New Vineyard. The piece of land our house once stood on was empty except for the foundation, as the building had burned down a few years ago after my family left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected for him to jump out and scare the living bejesus out of me, but I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone, somehow tied to the house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Mr. Widemouth. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, let's talk about it. I mean, honestly, I don't have much to say about this one. It's just good all around. It's like some demented child's imagination trying to hurt themselves while they're sick, but at the end of the story, you find out that no, Mr. Widemouth was taking people to a cemetery when their time was right. I don't know, it's a really good twist, but I doubt you could even call it a twist because it's pretty obvious that Widemouth was trying to hurt the kid from the start. Probably my only criticism of it is that there wasn't a proper escalation of threat, so to speak, because Widemouth, his first thing is, hey, jump out this window, and then it's, hey, juggle these knives, and it's like, you don't get anything crazy from there. Like, you don't get Widemouth trying to get the kid to stick his hand into a fire or some shit. I mean, honestly, if I had to restructure it, I would have the window scene come after the knives, because yeah, you're juggling knives, you slice your hand open, maybe you cut an artery or some shit, you have to get rushed to the hospital. That's really bad, but I'm pretty sure no kid's going to jump from a two-story window and survive, especially with that incline that they'd be going down. It felt like it should have been after the knives, but that's just me. The only thing I really want to know is what year did this story take place? Because let's say it was the early 90s because this was written in 2010. Then why didn't his parents leave a TV plugged in? Why didn't he have like a Super Nintendo to play on? Maybe they just didn't afford having consoles back then. I wouldn't know. 2002 kid here. In my experience moving out though, especially with those big, bulky CRT TVs, those were almost the last thing to go out because of how bulky it was, and plus you needed a thick TV stand in order for it to sit on, so it's like, why didn't the kid have a TV or something? Did they already move it? All in all, though, it was a fantastic story. Everything I'm saying is just really small nitpicks. I'll leave a link to the Creepypasta wiki down below, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, like it. If you dislike it, dislike it. Leave me your thoughts down below, and with that said, like, comment, subscribe. Have a lovely night.